The Rebbe spoke about Shloshim Yom before your Shvat. That every 10 days at the Bechina Say and Niglan Say Chassidus, and everybody Say Balabatim Say Bochrim, or you have to send it into the Rebbe, the Mashpia for Hedyu Niglan Chassidus. And the Rebbe said that if he doesn't get the marks, wird sein in the Bechina von eine Machon lebechina, you're not ready for the test. And the Rebbe said, Lashon, mer felt of nicht. Mer felt of you should be eine Machon lebechina. We were in Los Angeles. We were learning Masechta Pesachim. And I remember the Black Yamada, the Rosh Hadon Rachmanas. He was a real fathead. I had to learn one daf. The first week was Tesh Chanuyas, Daf Tes. It was a very hard Mishnah within the Gemara. Some mistake is their Reisa, some mistake is their Rabbanan. And if I would work so hard on Nigla every week, like I worked those 2 weeks, but anyway, the Rebbe spoke about Eine Machon lebechina. He said, Mer felt him nicht. And I'm Eine Machon l'shir. I'm mamish Eine Machon. Now, me can zog Eine Machon because I didn't spend enough time. I want you to know that I spent a lot of my time looking for the Eira Teira. That's the source of this Maimer. And I found it. And I'm realizing that's not a whole Maimer. It's two. If anybody has a WhatsApp, I downloaded it to my phone, the 2 pages. And you could look at these 2 pages and decide for yourself if it looks like this Maimer. But it's he says that it's Perek Yitches also. In footnote 1, he writes, you know, I have from Yossi Keller. I'm going to go look. Yossi Keller made Makedis. So little of this Maimed is in the Eira Teira, it's not even funny. And it's big in this Pedic. It's not the last Pedic, it's this Pedic. If anybody wants, I will send you, made a picture of the 2 pages, the Sefer you can't find here. And the only reason I'll send it to you, you'll look through it and you'll see, number 1, how much is the Rebbe Shabbos, how much is the Tzemach Tzedek. And how much the Rebbe Shabbos is changing and being, how much the Rebbe Shabbos is adding. And number 2, how bad the Shurim are, you know what I'm saying? I'm going to say the shir backwards, okay? I'm going to tell you what's bothering me. What's bothering me is, we all know the sugya, okay? And you know the sugya based on my approach. I'm telling you where the Maimed is going, which means if I'm misleading you, is all convey. In other words, I'm not telling you pshat in Maimed. I'm telling you the kivun of the next 3 Maimadim, of the whole hemshech. So if I'm wrong, I'm ruining 3 Maimarim for you. In other words, l'cheda till the end of the Zman, after Pesach I'm talking, is going to be offset by the way I'm presenting it to you. I don't think I'm wrong. I hope I'm not wrong. I don't mean to be wrong, but shgiyas mi yavin, you know what I'm saying? But what is the issue? The issue is that we want to understand Svidis according to the sheet of Drush, right? In the Maimer Eira Teira, later on, much later, it says that Beklau we say there's no SS Svidis lifnei atzimtzum, but Lafi Drush that there are. You can see Befedish in the Maimer Eira Teira and Yonam. I downloaded the whole Maimer also, by the way. If you want, I can send you a PDF of the whole Sefer. Today, it's nothing. It's a few megabytes of memory. I downloaded the whole Sefer and I made pictures of the first 2 pages. But later on in the Maimer, you have that words, mamish. The Beklau, you don't say Svidis higher than Atik and Ak. But Lafi Drush that is also Esses Svidis of Nea Tzimtzum, and then the Tzemach Tzedek hit on Reden. Tzemach Tzedek begins to speak how they are Lifnei Tzimtzum also. But I copied the first 2 pages because that's the Ikir. So the point here is we want to understand that Svidis Lifnei Tzimtzum because we hold that in spite of the fact that Tzimtzum Rishon is Siluk and Tzimtzum Rishon is Bekia, all of the Kechola and Yonim Shin is Baru Le'il, like we explained before, and we're going to be talking about it later some more, Mitzvah Shem, as the Svidis after the Tzimtzum, compared to the marker of as the Svidis Lifnei Tzimtzum, according to this Drush, is not Yesh Me'ayin. It's only Gilia Helam and Miyot. It's a very big Chiddush. That the Kav, Lagabe, and Seif Lifnei Tzimtzum, is not that the Tzimtzum creates this Madreg of Eid, because Lifnei Tzimtzum, there's no such thing as Eid HaKav, there's no Svidis, there's no such thing as Yoishe. But Lafi Drush, there is. So therefore, they didn't say Lifnei Tzimtzum, as it comes, Achar Tzimtzum is quote unquote Gilia Helam. It's not Yesh Me'ayin, it's not a Chiddush, it's not Eschatcha, it's only Gilia Helam, it's a Moedenik Chiddush. So you have to explain Lifnei Tzimtzum as a Svidis. But you have to explain lifnei atzimtzum es spheres in the kind of way that they're going to be erech that legabi la'achar atzimtzum should be gilui halam. In other words, you have to explain two opposites. On the one hand, you have to explain their head and amatzias lifnei atzimtzum because they're in lifnei atzimtzum. On the other hand, you have to explain their efsheri amatzias lifnei atzimtzum that compared to la'achar atzimtzum only gilui halam and not the schachos. If you don't know what I just said, I don't know what to do. I mean, we've been talking about this for shir after shir after shir. This is the issue, right? So he explains them that they're bittul. Right? He doesn't say that it's like a smaller aid included in a higher aid. He doesn't say what I told you, which would be the easiest way to explain it, that it's head that tfisis makim. He says that when a koyach has a madrega of atzmi, it has no metzias. And because when a koyach is a madrega of atzmi, there's no metzias, you can have two opposite koyachas, eishamayim, in one place. When a koyach is beis galus, or even when a koyach is behelim, because it has some kind of a metzias, the metzias of one is still the metzias of the other. But when the koyach is a madrega of etzem, each koyach is separate. Each koyach is separate. But because they're in Eifon the Bli Gavul, they're not in a Metzias, so they're not a contradiction of one another. This is the gang of the Rebbe. Now the Chiddush here is that we're talking about Oyer. This signin makes sense for Kalim. You know? Kalim are separate, but when they're cooler than the Etzem, they're one. But not one that they don't exist. One that they're bottle. We're speaking about Oyer, we're speaking about Sfidus. And we're saying each Sfida in the Madrega of Oyer, the way it's the Eifon the Bli Gavul head in a Metzias, so it could be next to each other. But he's very careful. It's not a skalalus. Oh, chas v'sholom. It's not a skalalus. What is it? It's taruvis. It's achtus. And it's yishkin yachad. They're sitting next to each other, one next to the other, and they don't talk to each other. Why? They don't contradict each other because since they're believable, they have no materials. But they don't talk to each other because they're acid. It's not that lifnei atzimtzum, the 10 become one. Lifnei atzimtzum, the 10 become completely bottled, but they're 10. Why is that important? That's important because it allows that la'achar atzimtzum, it should become 10. This is the way I'm presenting you pshat in Maimed. And again, if I'm wrong, it's really misleading. If I'm right, it's very helpful. And if I'm wrong, it's terrible. But this is how I'm teaching it. And then he brings a mashal. First he brings a mashal in a segrayim that's on top of the page. The first paragraph of Perek Mem. Then he brings another mashal in the middle of paragraph Perek Mem, but it's not the segrayim. And I told you, and I think it's true. I mean, you look at the I don't see here what's written here. A bit said that. You know, it's so far away the way the Rebbe and Shab is developing it. But l'cha'oira, this middle paragraph is not in the parenthesis because it's quoted from the Eratera. The Segrayim, which in the first paragraph is in a parenthesis because it's the Rebbe and Shab's own mashal. So I'm starting the shir with a kasha. If the Rebbe Rashab wants to bring two mishalim for this inyan, one mashal is the Tzemach Tzedek's mashal, the Zaydah, and the other mashal is his own mashal. Yeah, which should he bring first? I'll be pashtus. He should first bring the Zaydah mashal. Then say, "Oh, you want a mashal to the mashal? Here's my mashal." But he doesn't do that. The first paragraph on page Mem, he brings a mashal that's his own. It's in a Segrayim. The middle paragraph, he brings a second mashal. The second mashal is the Tzemach Tzedek's mashal, and it's not an Esegrai. So it's, and I don't know, I have no, not I have a Tiratz B'deichek, I have no understanding at all why the Rebbe Rashab does this. Now, Beklal, the one who was Mesaded, the paragraphs, is a big mistake. The mashal bazeh should be a part of the first paragraph on the page, and the second paragraph should be in from the words "V'lachem b'matan Torah," which is the last two lines of the middle paragraph. The way the paragraphs are broken up is just wrong. The middle paragraph should be with the first paragraph, except for the last two lines and the last three words, which is the beginning of the sugya of Reinos and Ishma Shemus Nir, which of course is going to be mitzvah after Pesach. That's my opinion. It's out my day. But I can't understand it. Why did Rebbe Rashab brings two mishalim, one after the next? First, he brings his own mashal in a parenthesis, and then he brings the Tzedek's mashal out of a parenthesis. kasha is doubled by the following fact. The mashal of Tzemach Tzedek, the second mashal, this is going to sound like a funny statement. It's very easy to understand, but it doesn't explain very much. The mashal of the Rebbe Rashab's own mashal is much harder to understand, but it explains more. In other words, Pras Geret, the Tzemach Tzedek's mashal is a simple mashal. The Rebbe Rashab's mashal is a more complicated mashal. So that makes the kasha even stronger. We're making a lot of assumptions here, right? The first assumption is that it's based on the Seder Torah. Like Arik Raskin was Matzia. And he's a real maven. There's no doubt about it. But who knows the whole Chassidus? We don't even have all the Chassidus. Maybe my mother, before the Rebbe Rashab was my thing. This Maimon didn't, like it's impossible to know. But assuming that this Maimon is based on this Seder Torah, and assuming my assumption, which is quite true in my Morech Chassidus, that when the Rebbe has a pnim and a segrayim, when the Rebbe Rashab is copied from different Maimon, and you have a text of the parentheses are his own, and the text is from the original. So the mashal in the first paragraph, which is in parentheses, is the Rebbe Rashab's own. The mashal, which is in the second paragraph, which is not in parentheses, is the Tzemach Tzedek's. So you have two reasons to reverse the order of these mashal. Number one, the Rebbe Rashab mistam had derech for his Eidah. I would imagine, he was his Eidah. The Acheinis is a simpler mashal. So balabatish geret, you should put the first mashal second and the second mashal first. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why the mashalim are in this order. And I'm putting this kasha out there with don't have an inkling of a teretz. In other words, it's not like I'm leading you on and I have a certain direction. Ich versteh nicht. The only thing that I could draw from this kasha is that I'm not understanding it correctly. Yes, especially the paragraphs were divided by the Bukhar Azetzer. You have to understand, the division of paragraphs was not made by a Rebbe, it was made by a printer. And the way the paragraphs are divided is especially confusing. Because the mashal bazeh in the second paragraph should be a part of the first paragraph. And the part about Matan Teira and Deyanus and Nishma and Shevet Nir should be the beginning of the new paragraph. So you have two mashalim, one after another, in the same paragraph. One is in parenthesis for the Rebbe Rashab's own. The second one is not a parenthesis, which is the Chayda based on the Tzemach Tzedek. And for two reasons, I don't understand the Seder. Now, if I say it 4 more times, I'm not going to have a teretz. Maybe you'll understand the kasha better, but I'm not going to have a teretz. Ich verstehe es nicht. I don't begin to understand. All I can do is read the Mishal. And I'm going to read the second mashal first. Forgive me, I'm reading the second mashal first. Why? Because the second mashal is very glad. Or to say it in other words, the second mashal we've been learning in the Nimshal already, on the previous page. Okay? Now, I want to go over the Nakuda. And I'll start from the basics. Okay? The basics are, what is the mashal for Eres and what is the mashal for Kelim? The mashal for Eres is lights, fires, candles, yeah? What's the mashal for Kelim? Burning coals, yeah? If you put 10 burning coals together and you blow on them, flame comes out of each one of the separate burning coals. How many flames are you going to have? 1. That's the nature of fire. You join light with light, you have 1 light. But you're still going to have 10 coals. In the Nimshal, when you draw a sesidus of Kalim together, they're always Eser. Because the nature of Kalim is that they're Chalkos. Til Atzmus. They have no Metzias at all. They have no Metzias whatsoever. But later they're going to become 10, or Ein Safe, and the tennis didn't start in Seder Ishtalshalos, the tennis started in Atmos. Because Kalim don't divide and don't multiply, don't have babies, don't have fathers and mothers. Every Kalim comes directly from Atzmos, right? So the 10 begins in Atzmos. Or the Sfira St. Kates and Kalim begins in Atzmos. But Oid is not like that. Oid is Mein Amoyer. The Eibishter is one, the light is one. So the division of light into many happens outside of Etz. First is one source, and from the source comes an Oyer. We have this idea that even in the Madrega of Eir, which is B'yetzem, there's already Pnimi and B'yetzem. Which is, in other words, the Madrega of Atzmos of Eir, which is the Metzias Nimtza of Eir. But it's even higher than the Gilu, if Sev of Kalam, the Makar Sev of Kalalman, there's already Eses Sfidus. So the idea is that normally the difference between Oyer and Keli is when you include many Kelim in one place, even when they're bottled and they look like they're one, they're still 10. Masha'enkin oid. When you include oidis in one place, they may look like they don't only unify in the sense that they look like they're one, they become one. Like the mushroom, you blow on 10 coals and you draw 10 flames that are 10 coals. If they're close enough, they're going to become one flame. Oid is achdus. Right? So normally, the idea that you have a bunch of things sitting in one place and they're in a state of ta'aruvus and they're in a state of achdus and a state of yishkun yachad, but not the skalalus, chas v'sholem, should apply to kelim, it shouldn't apply to oid. Because the nature of oid is dveikus with the source, dveikus with other oidus, and so on. What's the chiddush here? We're talking about svidus. In oid, we're talking about svidus and oid that they didn't become svidus because they went through kelim. And the kelim svidusized them. The kelim gave them a color. The kelim gave them a gavin. But we're talking about svidus, and they became svidus as a svidus because in the kavana of atmos and hutz, they're supposed to be giluy, they're supposed to be oid pnimi. Ubamela in the madrega of atzma v'ein tzeit, there's already pnimi be'atzma, svidus and oid. So the Rebbe argues that even though they're oid, and normally when you put two oidus together, you have one bigger oid. When you put 10 oidus together, you have one bigger oid. Here we're saying that we're talking about 10 oidus that even the way they're colored in lifnei tzimtzum, they're really 10. They're still 10. Why? Because the source of their being 10, their tennis, I want to point out, I don't mean the game. Their inyan of an asset goes till that's very safe. So you're talking about oyer, and the oyer is in one place, the oyer is bottled. But even though the oyer is completely bottled to the point that they're achtos, and they're taruvis, and they're yishkenu yacha, they're really still 10, you just don't see their tenness, you see their oneness. Why? Because there's no eskalalus. Hiskalalus would mean that the 10 has become one. There's yishkenu yachad, they sit next to each other, but they don't talk to each other. Chas v'shom, like Machon and Gabriel. But Machon, Gabriel, and Nevroim. Chesed and Gvura alakus. And we're talking lifnei tzimtzum. But in this shita, the way alakus, svidus, exists lifnei tzimtzum, they're, again, I'm a broken record, yeah? They're his arvus, which is usually a klipa term. His arvus, his achtus, yishkenu yachad, they're sitting next to each other, but there's no iskalus. They're 10, even though they look like one. So we understand why we're saying this. We understand why we're saying it. The reason we're saying it is because we want to understand that the kav, that's the spheres after the tzimtzum, the spheres lifnei tzimtzum are gili, elu, and miyat, and not yesh meyayin. But we don't understand how we're saying it. In other words, why we're going into this funny space where the spheres are kol and atmos and they're still esed, we understand. But how they're esed is very, very weird. So he gives a much from koiches. And koiches bepashas is like kelim. No, it's a kelim. And we're using the much of koiches for spheres. And we're saying that just like koiches, right? Eish and mayim. The way Eish is believable and the way mayim is believable, it's not a metzias of Eish, it's not a metzias of mayim, so there's not a contradiction. Similarly, Chochma and Bina and Chesed and Gevura, the way they're believable, their believableness makes them exist separately, but makes them exist in a way that they have no metzias, so b'meil they're able to be in one space. This is what the Rebbe said. This is what the Rebbe said. Do you understand? I don't understand. But this is what he said. To explain the nature of the oneness of as a spheres of Nei Tzimtzum, that they're taka one, but they're really still 10, there's a mashal from the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek, and a mashal from the Rebbe Rashab, and for reasons that are way beyond me, the Rebbe Rashab puts his mashal first, and the Tzemach Tzedek's mashal second. Let's read the Tzemach Tzedek's mashal first. Okay, second paragraph, page Mem. V'amashal bazeh. Okay, I'm going to do it just quickly. Let's see if I can do it quick. Because this mashal we learned already, on the bottom of the previous page. But in the previous page we learned it in the mashal. Same thing. Yodua mikeiches hanefesh. We know about the faculties of the soul. Let's remember what keiches hanefesh means. Keiches hanefesh means that in the nefesh there are keiches. Keiches hanefesh are not giluyei hanefesh. Giluyei hanefesh reflect the whole nefesh. Keiches hanefesh are a metzias in the nefesh. Now, how are spheres? Are spheres giluyei hanefesh or keiches hanefesh? Now, kelim are for sure like keiches hanefesh. Yeah? And in Sefer believable is certainly like giluyei hanefesh. What about spheres and oyer? How do we understand that spheres there? Like the koiches or like Giluyei Nefesh? It's interesting, yeah? If koiches come out of the nefesh, they for sure exist in the nefesh. And as I explained to you repeatedly, the Maimorim bring that every koyach, from the beginning of its emergence until its final manifestation, has 3 steps. Keach gilui, which is Eid and Keli, Keach nelam, which has a Hagbola Klolos, and then Keach atzmi, which is Bli Gvul. But when a koyach is in a state of Keach atzmi, it's a thing. It's the Bli Gvul of only Chochmah. It's the Bli Gvul of only Chesed. And the Rebbe Rashab says in the Maimon of Usfartem, the last Maimon, Hemshech of HaChodesh, that he doesn't understand how it could be. He doesn't understand how it could be. Pshitas and see it together doesn't make any sense. But that's the fact. The Chochmah is in a state of Bli Gvul. The Bira is in a state of Bli Gvul. It's only Chochmah, but it's Bli Gvul. And when only Chochmah is Bli Gvul, it's not Chochmah. So what is it? Let's read. Certainly, there is the koiches as individual koiches as they exist in the Madreg of Etzem. Visham Yishkinu Kulam Yachad. There they all live together. Again, they're not friends. They never fight, but they don't talk to each other. They're just Yishkinu Yachad. They're in the same place. The Kmei Shehem Bezgalas. Once the koiches are revealed, they're in separate kelim, and the kelim keep them from fighting with each other. Right? This is the right side of the brain. This is the left side of the brain. This is the right hand. This is the left hand. That's koiches hagilui. Okay. However, those same koiches, the way they included in the nefesh level of etzem, they're all in a state of shechina. They rest together. And again, Yishkenu Yachad is not Hiskalalus. Yishkenu Yachad means that they don't hurt each other, but they don't talk to each other either. They're a Metzias of Koiches, so they're separate, and they're completely bottled, so they can be in the same space. How could those two things be together? Because they're not Begilu. If they'd be Begil, they would destruct. Even in Etzem HaNefesh, the koiches are separate, and he uses the same mashal that he gave on the bottom of page. Lamites, zeh bebechinas eish, v'zeh bebechinas mayim. This one is fire, and this one is water. Mikomo kam mikom yachad chol. They're all in the same space. They're sitting together in the same etzem hanefesh, in a state of hisarvos, in a state of achdus, in a state of yishkonu yachad, but not in a state of hiskalalus. V'aynu leyesem misham betachas hazachos v'aruchnis. They're very refined, and they're very spiritual. And their refinement and their spirituality is they're not at all in the same erech, worth, where they're going to be revealed. So look at these words. The way they are in Etzem HaNefesh, they're betachlos hazachos varuchnius. How edel is edel? How spiritual is spiritual? Huh? Look at the next slide. They're not in a form which can be identified at all. They can all be in the same space. So there are 10. And we're not talking about kelim. We're talking about koiches, talking about oyer. But they're different spheres. But we're going in the shita that the spheres and oyer are not because of the effect of kelim, but because of the Eibish's ratzon, because of previous atzmas, previous biyetzer. So even though they're in the same place, they're 10, and they're being together is because they're in a state of Bli Gvul, or of etzem, and they're zachus v'ruchnius. And he continues, the k'meken yuv v'yasvis, now goes the nimshal. The meyeson b'yaslapshus b'kelem b'chesed d'gvura. When they go into the kelem b'chesed d'gvura, muvdom zemizeh. Mikoma k'mevlas b'eidam klulim b'ein seif baruch, when those same spheres include in seif. And we don't only mean Ein Seif Kesed. We don't only mean Ein Seif Atik. We don't only mean Ein Seif Ak. We mean Ein Seif Lifnei Atzimtzum. They're very fine and they're very spiritual in a way that's infinitely separated from the way they're going to be later. Each one is not separate. They're included together. But included together doesn't mean they're one. It means that their separation is not interfering with each other. This is what the Rebbe Rashab says. Now, this paragraph, if we're right, the Tzemach Tzedek says, more or less, if you want me to send you the 2 pages so you can tell me how much I'm making this up, please ask me. I mean, I was told that the Bacham have dumb phones, and a dumb phone's not Makabal or WhatsApp. I made the picture of the 2 pages. I could send you the first two pages of that Maimon. I could send you a PDF of the whole Maimon if you want also. And you can look through yourself. I'll show you one of the pages where the Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek writes that normally we don't say Sfiras Lifnei HaTzimtzum, but in this Maimer we are. I'll make a mitzvah after the shir. I'll copy that third page also. Chodeshing on the bills. But this is the Tzemach Tzemach Koichas. Koichas and Etzem HaNefesh are buckling. But it uses words that are really, really weird. What does it mean, Zachus Ruchnius? It should be built in Metzias. I mean, Edel is not nothing. It's just Edel. No? There's a difference between something that exists in an Edel way and something that exists in Heder Metzias. If they're in a state of Etzem, they're not Edel. They're in a state of Etzem. They're not even Edel. Which is weird, right? So you have a kasha. I don't know the tenets. Now go back to the Rebbe Rashab's own mashal, top of the page. And over here you see this Edel flushed out. The Rebbe Rashab's mashal is trying to explain it better. But the Rebbe Rashab's mashal is extremely difficult to understand. Let's read. U'kumay 5 lines into the page, bit to bit. U'kumay sech. There's an idea. An idea, a svara, yeah? Now, all svaras come from the Eibishter, right? We believe that seichel is before Metzias, not after Metzias. All svaras come from the Eibishter. All svaras come from the Eibishter means that the svaras on a higher level are much higher than the same svara as it comes down to a lower world. There's a order from the Rebbe, the Rabbi Kochs, where the Rebbe takes one idea and he shows it to you in 4 elements. A nigla svara. And he shows it to you in 4 worlds, in a higher world, in a lower world, in a lower world, and I forgot what it is. But the Biel has ganzen ishurim on it. Gwaldig. Huh? No, a nigla svara, a lomdish svara. It's a footnote, a few lines. Where the Rebbe shows you how you can say it in different signanim, all signanim of nigla. But the first signanim is the source of the second signanim, and the second signanim is the third of the... And you see the idea develop, and the Rebbe's bring out the idea of Teira... Ah? Huh?
Made of mixes?
So what are the 4 levels?
In Daled Elements or in Code?
He uses 4 different signanim of nigla, and each signet is more mitziastic than the signet before. Show me the ha'ara. I hope I will be able to recognize it when I see it, but I saw it many, many years ago. Teira is Eibish's Chochmah. It's Edel. The svaras are very high. Then they come down, and they come down, and they come down, so we should be able to understand them. And of course, when they come down, they're made into more mitzias. They have more misholim, they have more oisias, and they also are split up, A svara in a higher world becomes 10 svaras in the lower world. 10 svaras in the second world become 100 svaras in the third world. And so on. The lower you go, the more they break up. But svaras all start out high. So he says, you have a seichel mufshet. A svara, the way it exists in a very abstract way. That in the levels of great hafshata, when this seichel and svara exists in a very, very abstract way, it can be mixed together with the opposite svara, and you will not see that you're confusing 2 svaras. You are confusing 2 svaras. But to you, it looks like it's the same thing. Because the svaras are so b'avshata that the separation from one svara and the other svara escapes you. Ukamei, for example, Shnei chachomim shetefsim seichel echad. 2 chachomim that start out with one idea. However, each one understands it differently. Zeh be'efen kach, zeh be'efen acher. 2 chachomim, they hear the same svara. One understands it in his way, the other understands it in his way. So that one svara, what is understood by these 2 chachomim, has now been made into 2 svaras. When these 2 chachomim, who heard one svara, but because each one understood it differently, they became 2 svaras in their madrege, but they took it from one svara. And they took from this one svara, this one took this kind of a svara, this one took this kind of a svara. Look at the next words. When each one of them says the idea as they understood the original idea in their own netiyah, but they say it the way their koyach ha-chochma works on the level of etzem. Chochma has 3 levels: etzem, helem, gilui. In other words, these chachamim are gvaldige goyim, very abstract minds. They hear one svara, The Rebbe gives at the end of the paragraph the dogma of Hillel and Shammai hearing from Shmai and Naftalian. Shmai and Naftalian said one svara. Hillel and Shammai heard two things. If Hillel and Shammai, who both took their svaras from Shmai and Naftalian, will tell you what they're thinking, the way their seichel is madreg of etzem, it'll sound so similar to the original of Shmai and Naftalian, you won't see that now it's two. That said in the abstract, incredibly deep, the ordinary makabel will not be able to see that they're different. And they uses the word Ta'aruvus is a bad word. Ta'aruvus is a klipa word. You as a student will confuse them. You walked into Shammai Shir and you heard Shammai give up a different Shmai and Naftalian. The next day you walk into Hillel Shir, and he tells you the same shita, the same shir that he heard Shmai Naftalian, but Hillel heard Shmai Naftalian's words in the Tila Chassid. Shammai heard Shmai Naftalian's words in the Tila Gvura. If they say it to you, not by processing it first and bringing it closer to you, because they process it first and they bring it closer to you, they flush it out in such a way that you know Hillel is Neitek Klape Chesed and Shammai Neitek Gvura. But if they tell it to you the way they understood it themselves, in their own signet, Klape themselves, you're going to hear Shmai and Naftalian's words. And you'll think it's the same thing. It's two different things. You're being fooled. So you're making a mistake. But you're not making a mistake because you're lazy. You're making a mistake because the Svaras, what separates the Svaras, is so, what's the Lashon in the second paragraph? Zachos v'ruchnias. That the Talmud, who's the Makshiv, can't discern it. Segrayim b'teich segrayim. Parenthesis inside of a parenthesis. Do you know what I'm holding? 7 lines from the end of the paragraph, the end of the line. The two Talmidim, Hillel and Shammai themselves, they heard the shir from Shmai and Naftalian, and they both heard the same words. And yet Hillel heard Shmai and Naftalian's words, Neitek Klape Chesed. Hillel heard Shmai and Naftalian's words, Neitek Klape Chesed. Shammai heard Shmai and Naftalian's words, Neitek Klape Gevura. Dr. They know exactly the difference between what they two said. When they bring it out in words, but they bring it out in words, and the Oisis Haravar, that they speak the Svara as their Chochma is in a Madreg of Etzem, in relationship with self. They're not at all trying to reach the Talmidim. They're not even preparing to reach the Talmidim. You know, if you wanted to break it up into the Madregas, the way the Rav understands, the way the Rav prepares to give the Shir, and the way the Rav gives the Shir B'Peil. When the Rav gives the Shir B'Peil, it's from the Degas HaTalmud. When the Rav prepares to give the Shir, it's thinking about the word of the Talmud. But the way the Rav understands it himself, it's by himself. When Hillel and Shammai will tell you what they thought Shmai and Naftalian were saying, as they understood the word of Shmai and Naftalian, you will not hear the difference between the two. And you'll think that they're the same svara, and you'll be mix them together. And mixing together is not his kalalus, which is making two into one. It's ta'aruvis. It's mixing in a way that's unhealthy. Why? Because you don't see the difference. Not because you're not smart, but because the seichel is beyond you. So the Shammai and Hillel himself knows how they're disagreeing. Avo be'ez galas, as it comes out to the Talmidim, since they're saying it, the difference between the two is not evident. And people can confuse them, can entangle them. And he continues 5 lines at the end of the paragraph. But when they bring it down into words that are made for the Talmud to understand, when Shammai and Hillel flush out their thoughts, they repeat it, they explain it, they repeat it, they explain it, it becomes clear. Now you see how they understood Shmai and Naftalian's words differently. But when they told it to you in their own words, you couldn't tell. He gives 2 examples. Example number 1 is Seichel Yuli. A Seichel Madrega Yuli, which is, I don't know what that even means. Because the Yuli means Ke'echnela. Can come out in many ways. But then he brings the second dogma commission is Bayalil Shammai v'Hillel. The Shammai v'Hillel kiyum mishnei meravecha. They both got from one teacher. The one teacher seichel is what's called on this page seichel mufshel. The 2 Talmidim, Shammai and Hillel, that are makabel the seichel in the seichel mufshel, It's Shnei Chachamim Teifsim Er Seichalecha. They both heard the same words, they both understood the same words, but each one got it differently. If they will tell you, not for you, but for themselves, what they heard from Shabbos, Shmai, and Naftalion, you will not hear the difference between what Hillel heard and what Shammai heard. Because they're both quoting the same Rebbe. And in their own minds, the differences are so edel that it doesn't come out away from Mukshi. If they bring it down to your Madrigi, it begins to come out. It halts up. And he finishes the paragraph. All this explains that on the one hand, now I'm asking you, Balabatish, shouldn't this first mashal be second and the second mashal be first? Because the first mashal is speaking about koiches. It's a more concrete mashal, but we don't understand it at all. The second mashal is speaking about seichel goli, but it's seichel goli in a madrege of chochmas ha'atzmi. The second mashal is more of a mashal. It's more practical. It's more brought down, but it's much harder to understand. So we're probably making a mistake. Lemis. If my approach to the Maimon is correct, that Tzemach Tzedek's mashal would come first and the Rebbe Rashab's mashal would come second for two reasons. First of all, Tzemach Tzedek is before the Rebbe Rashab. And second of all, Tzemach Tzedek's mashal is simpler than the Rebbe Rashab's mashal. So you had a shiur, and the whole point of the shiur was to beweisen, aber versteht nicht.